This interview is brought to you by Burn It Up Coaching and the 21-day challenge. So if you are a entrepreneur or high performer, high achiever, and you feel like there's something not quite right, you're vaguely dissatisfied, you're not experiencing the results that you want, you're plateaued, you're stuck, you're just spinning your wheels, you're not getting to where you want to go, and you feel like something's missing, then the 21-day challenge might be the supercharged turbo boost that you have been looking for to amp up your results. What will happen is you'll set a target for 21 days, a stretch goal. It will stretch you to achieve this goal in 21 days. And during that time, you will have the support that you'll need. You'll have daily check-ins with me, texting and calling. We'll have weekly deep dive calls to make sure that you are succeeding, that you are thriving, that you're choosing and becoming your greatest possible self every day, every moment. And anytime you fall off track, you got me right there to help you back on, to make sure that you're kicking butt, taking names, and performing. And then also, we'll dial into your daily habits, your daily rituals and accountabilities, tracking your numbers, your statistics, creating the vision of where you want to go. Where do you want to be? What does your life look like in a year, that dream life? What do you value? What is important to you? So we'll get you a lot of clarity, we'll get you serious momentum, and we'll get you achieving what you want to achieve. So that's the 21-day challenge. Super happy to provide that for you. Let me know if you have any questions. If you want to join, send me a message, and we'll find out if it's a good fit for you. Now, for the iTunes review of the week, it is by Yogi Boo. Yogi Boo says, genuine and transformational. Chris has a gift for asking the right questions and a style that motivates and makes me feel great. He is living into his work and sharing it in a meaningful way that will inspire you to take big leaps. I highly recommend it. Awesome. Yogi Boo, thank you so much for that. And if you want to leave us a testimonial, a review on iTunes or Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self on Facebook, just search Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self on Facebook or iTunes, or go to beyourgps.com/iTunes to find us on iTunes. That's the link to do that. And then you can leave us a review. You can subscribe if you want to stay tuned to more updates. If you want to stay tuned to more updates, we appreciate that, and we'll have a lot of fun. Definitely. Now, for the man of the hour, and Jason, I'm still not able to see your video. Do you see it? There we go. Boom. Perfect. So nobody can see you yet. I'll bring you on in a second. So the man of the hour, Jason Miller. Jason has been a men's personal development coach since 2010. He helps men overcome anxiety, gain confidence, and become better leaders. He's coached many men to improve their relationships, expand their social networks, and boost their careers. As a professional coach, Jason combines coaching emotional self-mastery and conscious leadership with the halo effect of powerful body language to help men get what they want out of life and have a positive impact on the world. And I met this guy at a awesome event called Billion Dollar Body Live in, I think it was June, I believe it was. Yeah, June. And it was amazing, incredible. So shout out to Nicholas and Amanda Bayerly for putting on that amazing event. And Jason, are you ready to rock this, brother?
Oh, I'm ready to rock, Chris. I'm waiting for this.
Awesome. Well, dude, I just knew from the very second that I saw you and met you, it was like such a deep, powerful conversation. I loved that conversation. I knew we had to get more of it for our audience here at Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self. So thank you so much for showing up today and sharing with our audience your wisdom, your experience, and what you're so passionate about, man.
All right, I really appreciate that. Thank you. That was a really great conversation we had, and a really fun event. So I was glad I got the chance to meet you and
Awesome.
dive into some really cool topics we got into real quick.
That's right. That's right. Yes, we did. So we'll dive into that, I'm sure. And let's start off with the theme of the day, 0 to 60 real fast. So Jason, how has this concept of going from 0 or just beginning or just getting started to hitting your goal or reaching that 60 miles an hour real fast, how has that played a part in your life?
I think that the most important thing to get up to speed is to actually take some sort of action in the direction that feels uncomfortable.
Amen.
And what I've noticed too is that when I am being pushed, just to use myself example, my coach will push me, right?
Mm-hmm.
He'll push me for a length of time, and I'll have resistance, and then at some point, I'll kind of like water just kind of go over you
The
know,
tipping point. Yeah.
yeah, it'll hit that tipping point, and then I'll just like, oh yeah, I need to do X, Y, and Z like right now, and I'll crank it out in a week, and he'll go, yeah, I was telling you about that like 3 months ago. And it's like I'm glad you're getting to it now, and I'd be like, oh yeah. so it's kind of like those little leaps that kind of happen
Mm,
spontaneously, right? And all of a sudden you
yeah.
realize you picked up a lot of speed really quickly just because you're ready, or you just see it for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's so true, and I love the tipping point analogy. I love that sometimes it takes us getting hit over the head a couple times with some advice and life saying, "Hey, why aren't you doing this?" for us to finally get it. Go figure, you know. So
Definitely.
I love that we're bringing that up right now, man. And I mentioned that you are a men's coach and you're doing this amazing work in the world. Why don't you share a little bit more about specifically what you do and how you do it?
Sure. So I look at working primarily with guys like me, guys from technical backgrounds, guys that are analytical thinkers.
Hmm.
And our main struggles are maybe we're a little bit too nice.
Hmm.
We don't like to rock the boat. Maybe we're a bit of a people pleaser. We don't really like conflict. We kind of like everything to go smooth.
Hmm.
And so my focus is on showing those guys that as they grow, it becomes incumbent on them to take more on, to contribute more to the world.
Hmm.
So I started out a long time ago in dating coaching of all things. So I
Hmm.
hired a dating coach and got somewhere. And the way that she was working with men really appealed to me. And I started working with men and grew from there.
Hmm.
And dating is kind of a natural pain point for a lot of guys.
Yep.
And once guys get a handle on that, then it opens up space for them to take on more. And I started to look at my own life in terms of career and kind of feeling stagnant in career and that kind of thing. And kind of looking at management, being in a corporate situation and looking at management and saying, do I really want to do that? No. But at some point, over time, as I got more into coaching and helping guys out and growing in that direction, I saw the natural progression of getting to that leadership step.
Hmm.
And so that's how I see, the while guys might come to me for issues where they are struggling with anxiety or they are struggling in relationships, but once we start to get those things handled, then the bigger questions come up. And that gives
Hmm.
them more room to take on a vision and take on a purpose and start to
Wow.
look at the big picture. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the area that I like to work. And I think that a lot of um, the best coaches are the ones that just really kind of have been through it.
Hmm.
And that's why I seek out guys that are kind of going through it so I can actually help them along a similar path that I was on.
Wow. Damn, that's powerful, man. And I love how you mentioned that it's through the pain that you've gone through where you used to be that you're able to serve these people. You're able to make that difference because you have that emotional connection. You're like, hey, I was just going through this, not too long ago. I'm a couple steps ahead of you. I got the wisdom and the guidance to help you get through this. Come with me. I think that's the best place for someone to offer that guidance from and facilitate that. So that's beautiful, man. And as far as the journey, let's go back into that. Let's go back into how you got to where you are today. You mentioned tech, you mentioned being a nice guy, you mentioned, these different things and being analytical. Like what had you kind of start off on that direction, and tell us about that, and then we'll dive into more of the progression into the dating coaching and the men's coaching as well. But like, where did you get your start, and how did that go for you?
I I would say that it started from having a difficult upbringing and having a difficult relationship with my father.
Hmm.
And I found myself at a young age always trying to fix whatever problems I had in my life and constantly looking at my life as just, I've got 101 problems,
Hmm.
right? I'm here, kind of playing whack-a-mole. I'm feeling anxious in this situation and I can't get a date, or I'm not happy with career, or looking at the world kind of as a portfolio of problems.
Uh huh.
Um, and certainly seeking out help in that area, spent hundreds of hours in therapy trying to work this stuff out and not necessarily getting the level of improvement or satisfaction as a therapy that I wanted.
Right.
spent a lot of time in therapy. I mean, coming from that background, getting my relationships with my parents understood, getting my relationships with women understood,
Hmm.
all that kind of thing, getting a level of understanding, but actually still not getting over that hump into a sense of confidence, sense of mastery as to who I am and where I'm headed.
Hmm.
Um, so I had come, I'd established myself pretty well. My background's in technology, having a corporate job, pretty stable existence, kind of boring, kind of stressful. You know, um, I would relate very strongly to the movie Office Space, if anybody's ever
Hmm.
seen that movie. Uh, and I got to a point where I'd entered into a relationship with a woman and it got serious, but when it didn't work out, I was living with her, and when it didn't work out, it was like a divorce,
Hmm.
right? Emotionally, it was. And as I re-entered my dating life, I was worse than I ever was before. Not that I was
Wow.
ever great, but I was worse than I ever was before. I was incredibly frustrated.
Hmm.
And so it was a time when I started looking around and I started to see that there was a lot, this was back in 2008, 2009. There was a lot out there going on for men in the dating space online, certainly
Hmm.
a lot of different coaches in that space. And I didn't really like any of them until I found one that was different. So this coach, she had an interesting technique where she would have guys sit down with her cute friends and record a video of them having a conversation and then immediately play back the video and give you feedback.
Wow.
Absolutely brutal style of coaching. And it came from her. She was an actor, so it came from her background of acting training. And her idea was that you can actually get direct feedback as to how you're coming across, your nonverbals, and also the critical connection between how you're thinking and feeling and how that actually looks. So very often what I learned in doing that type of work was that there's often a disconnect.
Hmm.
There's a lack of congruence between what you're thinking and feeling and the image that you're putting out there,
Right.
your nonverbals. You could be trying to you could be feeling anxiety, thinking that you're not good enough, and then meanwhile you're trying to put an image out there where you're like, I'm the confident guy,
Hmm.
right? Or I don't want to look like I'm hiding something. So that was the type of thing that I learned in there, was that I was not at all congruent. I was getting a lot of feedback on that, and then finally had some breakthroughs in that area.
Wow.
And I was very interested in the way it worked. And so I asked her if I could coach alongside her. And she said, yeah. Hold on one sec.
Sure.
Oh, the dog is coming through. So I'd asked, so I'd asked her if I could coach alongside her. And then she said, yeah. And so that started off my career in coaching back in
Hmm.
2009, 2010. And so I started to work side by side and observe guys and give them feedback. And so as you said earlier, as you're getting up the learning curve on something, you start to teach something
Hmm.
that you're learning, that speeds up your growth. So that's how I started in that level of coaching. I did a little bit of that over several years and started to branch out into personal development. The critical moment hit when I read a very famous book called No Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover.
Hmm.
Read that book and discovered that it was 100% me.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, looking at my life as a set of 101 problems that I needed to solve actually condensed into 2 or 3 major areas to work on,
Hmm.
which is a big relief. I mean, after spending hundreds of hours in therapy and also,
Right.
taking mindfulness courses and just constantly trying to work on myself and feel better,
Hmm.
the book basically boiled down to what Dr. Glover calls this nice guy syndrome, which is just a constellation of anxiety, shame, codependence, and then on the other side of it, basically a deeply flawed worldview. So in that worldview, basically, guys are um, they're running a couple of flawed strategies. So in order to get one of the strategies is in order to get what I want out of life, I'm just going to be nice to everybody. Okay, I'm not going to tell them what I want. I'm just going to go out of my way and stuff down what I want, what I need, and do what I think they want in order to get them to like me, in order to give me what I want in the relationship, and so on. Deeply flawed strategy, and kind of carrying around this flawed worldview that that no matter what they do, they don't feel good enough, that if people find out they're not good enough, they're going to get rejected. And so there's all kinds of anxiety and shame is kind of bundled together into this. Um, Read the book in several hours, basically said, okay, wow, this is the entire owner's manual of me, right? And then everything just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, because all the work that I'd done up until that point was almost like all this pressure building up, like a dam of pressure.
Right.
And then the book was like basically the hole in the dam, and the whole dam came down all at
Wow.
once. And so everything got a lot easier from that point. I mean, having understood that and having worked through some of those issues with that previous coach, I was basically saying, oh, okay. So really all I need to do is get really good at experiencing anxiety and shame, and just watch my codependent behaviors and watch change my behaviors in real time. And it worked very, very quickly. As I got to the point where I started to get results, then it just fed on itself. It became a positive feedback loop for a change.
Right.
Now, I read the book in 2011. I'm still, coaching on the side. And in 2014, I did Glover's certification program and did that piece as well. Along the way, I did other certifications. I got NLP certification. I got various other trainings that I did, and basically transitioned into more into charisma, nonverbal training, also into, having difficult conversations, because nice guys don't want to have difficult conversations. So it was a natural progression. And then once I came across this online course called ULab, which is run by a lecturer at MIT named Otto Scharmer, that was another kind of one of these like wow moments. In looking at the natural, it basically showed me the natural progression between the personal development that I was doing in, mastering your emotions and getting more out of your own life, setting your own priorities, setting your own purpose. And also, how does that look at a collaborative way? This is the stuff that you and I were talking about a little bit at the seminar, was if I can work with my own anxiety and be okay with it, if I can work on my own shame and be okay with it, I'm creating some emotional space for myself, right? And in that space, I can work harder to see it from another person's point of view, right? If I can do that, then I can actually be a better leader. And if I can do that from that perspective, I might actually enjoy leading as a role or as an activity. And so that was kind of the thing that once I took this course, it got into things. It had concepts like an empathy walk. Whoa. Can you imagine if someone in corporate said, let's all start to learn how to do these empathy walks, where we we talk to our employees in such a way that we like really get to know them and get to understand what their motivations are and what's important to them, and work with that so that we can create a mutually beneficial solution. I was like, why? Please, yes, more, right? Right. And so that's kind of where it naturally went. A few years ago, I was in a contract position. It was a leadership position at a company, and I was discovering that, of course, it wasn't run that way. And I was starting to offer these deep one-on-one conversations with some of their employees, and I was getting insights and able to work things out that they couldn't because they weren't having that level of conversation. So that was a really great experience for me in that area. And so now that, currently coaching, some of my clients are involved in that. So they're getting direct coaching from me on how to open those conversations up, how to be brave to have those conversations, how to set that tone and take the lead in that conversation, and get that person in alignment and on board and working together to form that solution that nobody anticipated. That's the idea.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I know that the focus of this is like a world that really works, right? And it's through collaborative leadership. So these difficult questions have to be asked Otherwise, it's going to be a world of, like people walking on eggshells, people trying to pretzel to make others happy, or to fit in, whatever it might be, like whatever people are doing. So let's start diving into actually changing some of these tendencies so that we can create that collaborative workspace and leadership opportunities. What do we need to know? How can we start digging in and rewiring things, so to speak?
Right. Well, I think traditionally, if you want to just look at kind of traditional corporate culture, there's a lot of stuffing down of emotions, and certainly a lot of denying what people want, need, or are motivated by. And it's hard to share that as a value. I think that if we just take a hypothetical team, right, with one team lead, it takes time. If that leader really wants to get to know each one of those individuals on that level in order to work with them, it takes time. And that's actually a lot of hard work to get to that point. And to be willing to listen at that level without judgment, to be willing to stay present and ask the open questions so that they'll actually give you information that you can use, right? It takes a lot of patience and willingness to go there. And I don't know that everyone is willing to do that. The payoff is huge, right? So if somebody feels heard, understood, and their needs are taken into account, and that they are on board and believe that you're working in the common best interests as best you can, they're more willing to take your lead and follow it.
Right.
They're more willing to collaborate with you and come up with a solution. So the challenge is really for that leader to do the personal development to get to that point where they can hold that space for people to open up. I got feedback when I talk about that actual corporate gig where I stepped in as a consultant. I was getting feedback from the guys that I was sitting with and having these conversations with, is like, kind of feels like therapy. Well, the reason it kind of feels like therapy is because therapy is one of the few places where you can get that level of listening.
Yeah.
Right. Coaching is one of those, true coaching is one of those rare places where you can get that level of listening from somebody, where they're actually sitting in non-judgment and asking open questions and facilitating you finding your own answers through asking those broad questions. So for somebody to make that transition, it really is a massive mind shift. I kind of already, having taken that course online, I mentioned ULab, which is fantastic, and it's free, and I recommend everybody take it that's interested. These are people that are gravitating towards these types of frameworks and these types of solutions are the ones that are like already concerned about not just the problems within their own organization, but the bigger problems in the world itself. I mean, what level of conversation do we need to have in order to get those solutions? What kind of values do we need to share in order to get out of a zero-sum game and get into synergistic type solutions where the solution is so great nobody could have anticipated it. Right. And that doesn't happen unless people are really willing to do the work and see the world through each other's eyes and be able to break out what's important and see what's important across all considerations, right?
Yeah, so what I hear is that to be an effective leader and to lead a team effectively, to have a team work together, it takes really being able to understand each other's viewpoints and have a safe space of listening, a safe space of sharing our honest ideas and input so that we can make the most amount of progress as possible. Otherwise, everyone's going to be in boxes, so to speak, not performing at their maximum potential.
It very, very well summarized. I mean, I think that is the challenge, because there's a certain amount of personal growth that it takes in order to get there. Is somebody who is having a hard time observing their own ego is going to have a harder time getting out of that space at that moment. So, anybody who's hungry, tired, stressed is going to have a harder time. Anybody who's coming from a worldview or a set of beliefs that aren't helpful, it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
We all come from that perspective in one way or another. We all have those things. So the challenge is can we have a conversation about those as well?
Hmm.
So it's tough. You have to incrementally introduce people to making it safe to do this kind of thing, especially in a touchy environment like, an organization,
Yeah. Because
right?
there's like politics, there's not wanting to say the wrong thing to the wrong person.
Exactly. And there's huge major cultural considerations, right?
Yeah.
Kinds of things. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the guys that I've been working with, it's he'll have an issue with an employee, right?
Mhm.
Maybe employee's not as efficient, not getting stuff done, blowing deadlines or something along those lines, right? And it's like, okay, so you need to actually start to figure out why,
Mhm.
right? You have a choice. You could just basically say go faster, or you could actually get to know what is actually slowing him down and getting to
Mm.
the point where you can address that need that he has to keep everything slow. Um, so the thing is that, um, the challenge is to making it safe for that employee to open up and talk about it, right?
Yeah.
To get to that point where they can actually tell you what's really going on, so that you can actually address it directly instead of just exerting more force, right?
Right. Right. So to be able to be a good leader, we have to be able to get into the other empathy, the emotional space of someone else, and we also have to provide that safe space so that people are able to share. What do you think most entrepreneurs are challenged with about creating their own space for themselves, about doing the work on themselves, really getting themselves into a safe space where they feel heard and validated and they're able to share these things to move through them, to get past them?
Number one question actually that I would ask you is, do they have someone to share it with,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So, I think it's important to, especially people that are like me in the coaching space, to have a coach. Otherwise, we
Yeah.
can't see where we're at, what our blind spots are, those kinds of things. But I think the overarching theme is to practice non-judgment. So I don't know about you or any other entrepreneur out there, but I'm going to beat myself up about everything. I'm not doing enough this. I'm screwing this up. I need to do more of this. I'm not
Yeah.
getting results, right? I'm distracted by this. I should be focused on this. Whatever
Hmm.
is coming up in your mind that you tend to beat yourself up about or be hard on yourself, because we're achievers, right? We want to
Hmm.
we want to do a lot. We want to make big things happen, and and to practice that non-judgment on yourself is really critical.
Hmm.
Can you practice non-judgment on yourself, meanwhile practice accountability at the same time, right?
Ooh. Ooh. Ooh.
you know that's a tricky one. And that's a big one. And then having my own coach is massive, because
Yeah.
he's going to give me a perspective on what the difference between beating yourself up and feeling bad about yourself versus actually what he calls putting me on the shame train,
Hmm.
right? It's sort of like, what we talk about in the nice guy paradigm. We talk about toxic shame and healthy shame, right?
Hmm.
um, Toxic shame is just this kind of notion that a lot of us carry around, that we're not good enough, right? No matter what we do, I suck on some level. People aren't going to like me. I'm never going to get this done. Whatever that looks like for you,
Hmm.
it's toxic. It's not helpful in any way, shape, or form to kind of carry those thoughts around and believe them, right? Would you
Right.
agree, Chris?
Right. I agree.
Okay. Then we got something called healthy shame, which is basically what happens when you get out of integrity,
Hmm.
right? So if I don't do something I say I'm going to do, then I'm in healthy shame.
Hmm.
So that's when my coach puts me on the shame train, right?
Hmm.
Oh, Jason, you didn't say what you said. You just said you're going to do. Why not? What happened? What's going on?
Hmm.
Okay, look, you really don't have an excuse. You're on the shame train. Now, in my experience, and in facilitating other guys with this, healthy shame tends to be kind of motivating,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
If somebody's doing it in kind of that non-judgmental, just kind of plain spoken way and saying, dude, you just didn't say what you're going to do. What's going on?
Hmm.
What are you going to do about it?
Hmm.
Because you're not in integrity. You're not aligned with your purpose. You're not aligned with your vision. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. You got to get this stuff done no matter what. It's like, okay, I got to get it done. Right.
Right.
Problem is that a lot of us, especially nice guys, will say, oh, look, here's healthy shame, but it's really toxic shame.
Mm.
So then they're going to use it as a reason to beat ourselves up. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I'll never do this. I suck.
Right.
Right. And then it's extremely demotivating. So basically, you just killed the purpose of healthy shame in one shot because you don't know the difference.
Mm. And
Right.
how do we distinguish which one is running it, or what the source is of our shame?
The toxic shame is something that's based on our experience when we're very young.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's something that happens so early we can't even really necessarily put a name on it or find a direct cause for it. It's just kind of this thing that hangs out there.
Mm-hmm.
It gets triggered by various situations. Some of them might seem random and unexpected. You just kind of have to acknowledge that it's out there, that it's a thing, and it's going to react on its own, right? What I train guys to do when I'm teaching them accountability is like, okay, when you feel that pang, when you're held accountable, and I tell you didn't do your homework, it's like, I want you to slow down and say, oh, there are actually two things here.
Mm.
So if you slow down and observe, there's two things here. So in order to really work with the toxic shame, we got to practice non-judgment.
Mm.
We got to actually say, okay, toxic shame is a phenomenon. It just exists. It's neither good nor bad at this point in time. Again, this is a practice. You're not going to believe it in the beginning, but I'm going to sit here and watch it. Meanwhile, when I don't do what I say I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can find any distinction between the two as I observe it in real time.
Right.
So it's a kind of a really specific mindfulness practice to look at that and slow it down and get feedback. You know, I give them a lot of feedback along the way. Well, that sounds like one, that sounds like the other. It's a critical skill that I've noticed that people could use in the sense that because beating yourself up is just demotivating.
Right.
It gives you something else to focus on. Take your focus off the toxic shame, put it on the healthy shame, just get to work. It's really helpful.
So is the healthy shame, is that typically best facilitated by having, a coach, a mentor, a business partner, a accountability partner, someone outside of ourselves who holds us to account of the promise? Is that like, are we able to do it on our own, or would you say that's essential, especially when we first get started?
I think people can do it on their own, but you've got to be really motivated to document it.
To call it out on yourself.
not just deny it when it happens, but also document it. So if you're not actually journaling about this stuff frequently and reviewing your journal frequently, okay, then it is extremely helpful to have somebody giving you feedback along the way. Whether, like you said, whether that's a coach or someone you trust, a mentor, whatever person that you trust to give you clear, as unbiased feedback as they can give you.
Feedback.
Yeah, and they're holding you in non-judgment. I mean, that's a critical piece, right? Yeah. So that's a challenge. The idea, though, of if you want to do it on your own, you've got to journal these experiences.
Yeah,
you got to actually document them all and make sure that you're reviewing them all and starting to look at even metrics within that. Are you okay, what is your plan for tomorrow? Okay, then review at the end of the day. What did I do? What I didn't do? What did I do? What I didn't do? That's like a mouthful right there. What did I do and what didn't I do? It's not just that. It's also then going through each of those and actually saying, well, how am I reacting to that? Right? Am I beating myself up? Am I demotivating myself? Is this my usual thing? Can I give it a name? Can I watch it happen next time in real time and take the action that needs to be taken in spite of the psychology that's happening in my mind? So it is doable on your own, but I think that the catch is that in order to get that objectivity, you've really got to rigorously document what you're going through. It's hard. It's far easier. I would not have progressed as quickly as if I didn't have, people holding me accountable along the way. I mean, it's a game changer. And I think most people out there would understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, what is what does it mean to be a man? What does that mean for you?
This is such an interesting question because, as we all kind of know, that the archetypes are out there.
Mm-hmm.
We basically have access to all the male archetypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Historically, maybe men only had access to a few. Now we've got access to them all. Uh, and then also we're having, pressures and ideas that are also influencing what we think that might be in
Mm,
society as well, right?
yeah.
It's really interesting because a lot of the if you go back to the original dating coaching that I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it was kind of looking at what is the manifestation of masculinity, what is attractive,
Mm,
what does confidence look like,
mm,
uh, what does it mean to be a man physically. So starting from that point, basically what I discovered in doing that work is that if you are relaxed and congruent as a man, you are a man.
mm,
Okay, so however that manifests in you physically, that would be how I would define you as a man. I wouldn't try to put you in a category or put you in a box, but I would say as you work towards your own confidence, your own relaxation into stress, relaxation in interacting with people, handling difficult situations, taking the
mm,
lead, all of that. If you can do that in a confident and relaxed way and work towards that as a goal, then I would say you're establishing your masculine ideal. I
mm,
wouldn't worry about looking at anybody else's image of what that should be. The reason I reached that conclusion was because as I started to relax on video, in doing those trials with being
mm-hmm.
on video and getting that
Yeah.
harsh feedback,
Yeah.
going through those iterations, as I became more congruent, I started to come across as more naturally masculine, more confident.
Hmm.
Right. So it's in that relaxation, the discovery of what each individual man's version of masculinity will emerge.
Hmm. What role does the feminine energy play in a man being able to own his masculine energy?
Because I kind of de-emphasize the definition of the masculine. I also de-emphasize the definition of the feminine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where I would speak to that in terms of kind of the leadership frameworks and models that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
The whole concept of doing an empathy walk would be probably something that would be considered more, quote, feminine,
Right.
right, than something traditionally masculine, which would be something like issuing orders
Right.
or playing to win, instead of collaborating.
Hmm.
And I think that for the things that I like to work on, I'm a little bit less concerned about putting them in the masculine or feminine box.
Hmm.
Now that being said, if you are the type of person that likes to look at that stuff, then I would say, yeah, it would be a question of figuring out what your own balance between the two is and relaxing into that, and
Hmm.
and not caring what anybody else thinks, however that manifests for you, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Um, what does it take for a man to be his greatest possible self? You mentioned that, really sitting with the alignment, being relaxed. What else? What else on the journey of evolution of a man being his GPS, his greatest possible self, is required?
It is, yeah. So as I let me kind of go back to this course that I took,
Mm-hmm.
this Theory U course that I took, and the way that course opened up was the instructor basically lays out the world's disconnects, the world's disconnection between man and environment, all the environmental destruction that we're doing, disconnect between man and himself. So the spiritual gap, the sense of not knowing who you are and seeing how you fit in the world, the economic disconnect, income inequality and everything that manifests from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of these massive global species level, life level, earth level problems,
Mm-hmm.
and then drawing the lines as how that fits to the individual. I mean, actually making the connection to how that fits the individual, right?
Wow.
So to get into the level of self-actualization that you need to get to in order to actually look at what the world's problems are, you've really got to clear a lot of space, right? So in defining a man in terms of how I like to coach guys into this is, what is your, getting to the point where we can start to ask a question, what is your contribution to the world, right? Can we get to that point? Because if you're stuck in a sense of, I just don't feel good all the time, I can't quite make things happen, right? Maybe I'm in a victim space. I can't get you there unless I get you enough skills to get some self mastery around that. So if you can master your emotions a little bit, get a sense of footing, when the emotions aren't going your way, then I'm creating space for you to contribute to more. So I think that it's also, it's everything we've been talking about. It's the accountability. It's actually looking at purpose and contributing to the world. It's the big picture questions. Yeah. And again, what I just said could equally apply to a woman.
Yeah.
If she's inclined. So it's not something that I would restrict to any individual,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's cool because there's life philosophies that apply to both men and women. And I believe that there's distinctions that men and women have in how we operate, how we think, how we get energy, how we get fulfillment, how we tend to operate most likely, what is the majority of our population operating under. And I'm always looking for those leverage points of what makes me unique as a man. And it's not necessarily that is more or less useful than what makes a man and a woman successful. What are the patterns? What are the traits? What are the leverage points? But I think it's always just awesome to ask those kinds of questions. Another kind of specific example is, I was reading this book called Wild at Heart by who is it? I don't remember who it is, but it's called Wild at Heart. And he talks about how young men, when they're between the ages of 11 to 14, they're asking this question of, do I have what it takes? Right? Am I powerful enough? Am I strong enough? And they look to the men around them to answer that question. It can't be answered by other boys. It can't be answered by their mom. It has to be answered by other men. And so I personally didn't know that, and I was going through high school and college, and even up until recently, last year or so, I was trying to prove that I was enough because I never had that question effectively answered. My dad loved me. He was there for me, but I just never got that specific question answered how, in my perspective, it needed to be answered. I never heard from my dad or received the message from my dad that, Chris Burns, you're a fucking warrior. You're a powerhouse. You have what it takes. You can do whatever you set your mind to. I never felt like that. I always felt small and shrimpy and weak when compared to my dad, who's 5 inches taller than me and big and burly and all this kind of stuff. So I know that for me that was important to recognize what were some of the leverage points that make me a man, whereas a woman, she wants to know, is she prized? Is she beautiful? Is she, radiant? That's her unanswerable question that she's constantly trying to have answered through life. Versus men, it's do I have what it takes? It's that am I enough question. And I think that there's an aspect of it that is, once we recognize, I keep asking this question, I keep trying to prove that I'm enough, then we're able to mitigate the actions that are trying to prove that and cover it up, and shame and guilt and whatever else might have been around that in the past, wounds. We can get awareness of it and not be driven by it, but it's still something that fulfills us in some way. I believe that there's a healthy part of that question of, am I enough? How can I grow? How can I expand? How can I play more and achieve more and contribute more? And then there's an unhealthy part that is doubting, that keeps us small, that is more linked to the fear and to the fight or flight response, I think amygdala in our brain, rather than empowering and contributing as much as we can. So I thought that was fascinating.
Very fascinating.
Yeah. So I wanted to share that because I think it's important for men to understand what drives them as men. What are those, underlying things that they just didn't know, and we didn't get an owner's manual on how to take care of our body, we did, but I don't think it's a very effective one that the government teaches us. But hey, that's another story.
The food pyramid. There you go.
So it's like, just knowing those leverage points as a owner's manual. And I think that there's an aspect of it that is gender neutral and applies to both sexes. And then there's also gender specific, that the more we understand about masculinity and testosterone and how that process is released, how our body works, then the more powerful and capable we can be to create our reality. Anything that we want to be, do, or have, the more information applied, as well as the accountability to apply it and integrity and following through, then the better our life gets from there.
I would agree. I think that from my own experience as a man, and I'm really only going to talk about myself.
I love it
in this regard, because, I do think there's a huge, while there are trends on both sides, I do think there's a huge spectrum on both sides, and all of us can play both sides at any point. We can choose to play both sides. So it's not like we're not free to do that. But I do have a thing, and maybe Chris, you and other guys out there can identify with this thing, but somebody asks me a question or presents me with even the smallest problem, it goes on the problem stack. So in my mind, there's a problem stack. They're all the problems stacked up that I know that I need to fix and solve and work out, and all my to-dos and everything I need to do, my business, my clients and all this stuff. And then it's like, oh, then I got to work out, and then I got to do this. I got to, I got all that, my problem stack, right?
Yep.
Operating in my mind at all times, this list of things, right? Anybody comes up to me, my girlfriend, my mom asks me a question. They ask me, how do I do this on my iPhone? How do I, I'm stuck and can you fix this, or what should I do about this? Or what color should this be? Boom. You're adding problems to the problem stack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Chris, but the taller my problem stack gets, the more stressed I get. So I explained this to my girlfriend once, and she's like, oh, that's really weird. It's just like totally new concept. I'm like, yeah, every time you ask me a question like that, boom, goes on the problem stack.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm going to have to start setting a limit because my inbox is too full right now. So let's not put anything else on there. Just the act of you asking the question and me hearing the question, boom, goes on the problem stack.
Yep.
I got to fix it. I got to solve it. I can't.
Whether you wanted me to or not.
That's it. It's like the engine is always running, the machine is always working, the computer is always on. So that's just one anecdotal story of kind of the thing, and I think I sort of say to all the guys out there, respect that you might have a problem stack.
I love it, man. I want to dive real quick into leadership and organizations just to round this off. Any final recommendations that you have on how to raise our leadership effectiveness, how to create better teams, how to collaborate more effectively and produce better results?
Sure. I think that it's a valuable step to, I'll give you a really kind of a micro example of what I'm talking about, that where it breaks down is in the simple act of giving feedback, right? Well, I've been in courses and I've read books about feedback, and I can tell you that you've got to have both parties be in agreement that they're going to deliver each other feedback before you actually start delivering feedback, right? You can't walk up to somebody and say, hey, Chris, got some feedback for you. Want to hear it? No, I do not want to hear it. And I know you're going to tell me anyway. And I know that if I say, no, I don't want the feedback, then that's not okay either. Right? Yeah. They're trapped. Wow. They can't say yes and they can't say no. Think about it. Right?
Yeah.
So in any sort of relationship that you have on a team, with peers, managers, it's really critical to set the value and importance of feedback. Now, the rule around feedback, and I learned this a long time ago through that video work I was telling you about, is that we have to kind of redefine what feedback is and what it's for. Okay. So the instruction that I would give a client or anyone else about feedback is that somebody's going to give you feedback. It's their point of view. It's their opinion. They might be right. They might be wrong. Your job is to take it in And the hard part when you take it in is to let your ego spin up, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to have to work on not reacting to what our ego wants us to do. So the feedback really is there for you to take it or leave it. Just let it sit, see if it works for you, see if you learn anything from it or not, and discard whatever doesn't stick. So if we can enter that, that's kind of a first step. If we can enter that paradigm where everybody agrees to give each other feedback, we set the format for it, we set the rules, we can trust that the organization or the team's going to evolve to where it needs to go. And if people need to leave, we'll work it out. If people come on board, we'll work it out.
Yeah.
But we're setting a culture where we're saying that feedback is valued and we know what to do with feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I love this because me and my girlfriend, we started doing weekly reviews of our relationship. And we started asking questions like what had us grow in our relationship this week, what were we grateful for, what had us want to pull away, what had us want to disconnect, you know, like, so it's a safe space to talk about these questions. And one time after we had started this habit, she all of a sudden busted out that we were going to do this review, this weekly review, while we were driving somewhere. And I was like, whoa, you know, because like we didn't do it when we were supposed to do it. I was like, whoa, this is not the time. And I start like shutting down. I'm like, I don't know, like, and I didn't feel safe. So having people feel that safe context, that safe space, and setting, hey, this is only going to go for an hour. We're going to do this for an hour, get as much done as we can. Or we're going to go over these questions. So be prepared to answer these questions. Or here's the procedure. Here's what you can expect. Preparing people as much as possible for that will make the biggest difference in having that session be effective. So I started doing that with my girlfriend. I'm like, wait a second, why am I not doing this in my business with my business partner? Like, if I'm doing it there, like I should be doing it here, right? So I'm duplicating that in my business now with my business partner, and it's just like, it's awesome, man, to have that opportunity for feedback, to feel safe in it, to have a specific structure and context.
Well, and Chris, usually people start out with their business partners and then
I know,
take
right?
the bold step introducing it in their romantic relationship. Yeah, you went the other way around. So my hat's off to you on that one. That took a lot of courage.
It's funny because my business partner is like more experienced in executive skills and like business, and I'm more experienced in the relationships. He doesn't like being on camera as much. Like I'm good with that stuff. I love being on stage. Just throw me in somewhere, I'll perform. You know. Versus he's like want to plan and prepare and do all these things. So I just thought it was funny because, you know, I'm the relationship guy, and I was like, I really want this relationship to work. So let's implement this weekly review, you know. But in the business, it's like, wait, why didn't we do this over here? So it's funny. But yeah, man. So that's awesome. I love the opportunity for feedback. Super important and powerful. So Jason, we're beginning to wrap up now. And I want to hear last minute wrap up thoughts, and then how can people stay connected with you, and what do we want them to do next?
Okay, sure. Just to wrap up, Chris, thank you so much for the opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and I love getting deep and getting into this theoretical stuff. So it's been a lot of fun, and I hope that everybody else who's listening enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yes.
So, and if you'd like to, the best way to keep in touch with me is real simple. Just use my email. It's very distinctive. It's jason@jasonmiller.coach. Okay. And I've got two websites. I've got jasonmiller.coach, which is a little bit more business oriented. And then I've got niceguycoach.com, which is a little bit more personal oriented. So go to either of those sites. And I have what I'm putting together, and it's not quite ready, but your audience can have access to it now. If you shoot me an email at jason@jasonmiller.coach, I will send you one of my, it's what I call a personal power funnel. Okay. So this is a very geeky flow chart that I created working with one client a couple of years back on how to get you jump started out of feeling bad into action and then letting it go.
Wow.
So it's kind of this, I created this funnel. It'll be a PDF, and it's basically a positive feedback loop. So the trigger is, do I feel bad? Okay. Then it goes through, what do you need to be aware of? What do you need to accept? What do you need to do? What do you need to let go of? Do I feel better yet? No. Go through it again. Go through it enough times, and you'll eventually feel better, and you will have gotten a whole lot more done than had you just sat around and felt sorry for yourself.
I love it. I love it, man.
So
So cool.
we created that a
Self-processing. That's awesome. That's an epic tool.
yeah, so we created that a couple of years ago, and so I've been refining it ever since. And so shoot me an email, I'll send it out to you,
Mm-hmm.
and I just created a new version of it with a little video that goes along with it, and look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Jason, you're the man. Love talking to you. It is a lot of fun, dude. And yeah, dude, keep up the amazing work. I love the discussion too. It's a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see you on more stages, more interviews, impacting more men's lives, man. You're doing great, and I'm excited to be on the journey with you. Thanks so much for coming on today. And for everyone who's here, stay connected with Jason. Send him a message, send him an email, stay connected, and keep growing into your greatest possible self. Jason, I appreciate you, man.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it so much, Chris. I appreciate your time and having me on the just the podcast and everything. And
Awesome.
love talking to you, man. Can't wait for our next time to hang out.
That's right, baby. Awesome, Jason. I'll see you soon, okay?
All right, take care. Adios.
Take care.